Now we'll be going to the House District 21 candidates. As you know, Representative Christy Pagan is term limited out. So we have two candidates running for that position, Ethan Petzold and Ranjeev Puri. Both of you can unmute yourselves, and we will begin with opening statements. Those will be in alphabetical order. So Ethan, you can start with your opening statement.
Great. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, 2 minutes.
Great. Thank you. Well, good evening, Democrats. I'm running for state representative to fight for anyone who's been knocked down. And we know that this virus has knocked down a lot of us. I know what it's like to be the underdog. My family coming here as refugees, escaping the Armenian genocide, and growing up in a middle-class household, watching my parents work full-time, go to school at night, but still worry about paying the bills. Growing up, I struggled in school, and it was deemed unlikely I would even graduate high school. But against the odds, I was fortunate to have attended strong public schools with great staff that helped me rise to overcome those challenges, even when others said I couldn't. Those teachers are the reason I can stand before you today. They inspired me to want to live a life dedicated to lifting up those who've been knocked down. And that's why I became a nonprofit professional and community organizer. But all my work started when I got involved in Democratic politics here in the 11th Congressional District while I was still in high school. From this, I learned about community organizing, from knocking on doors in this district. I witnessed individuals making a difference in the lives of others as I led volunteer efforts and earned the President's Volunteer Service Award twice under President Obama. I've seen how we can come together to affect change when I served as campaign manager when we flipped our local government from red to blue. And I'm proud to have represented Democratic voters in this district when you voted for me to be the youngest person in Michigan history to serve as a delegate at the 2016 Democratic National Convention. At the end of the day, I know what it's like to be knocked down and what it means to struggle. That's why I've dedicated my life to giving ordinary people a fair shot and a seat at the table. I hope to earn your vote, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ethan. Okay, Ranjeev, 2 minutes, please.
Great. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, sounds great.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for having us, and thank you to the 11th Dems for putting this on. Again, my name is Ranjeev Puri. A little bit about myself. I am the father for two small boys headed to Plymouth Canton schools. I am the husband of a very savvy and talented small business owner, and I am the son of immigrants. And I bring that up because my parents came to this country nearly 50 years ago for the sole reason of providing their future children more opportunity. I watched, and as the immigrant experience completely shaped my childhood and my upbringing. I watched as my dad went from machinist to turned engineer, and my mom worked as a registered nurse for over 35 years before she retired. Watching her work selflessly to take care of her community, watching my parents build their communities is where public service was instilled into me. And those values led me to 2008, where I got a chance to work with President Barack Obama. So I was living out in Chicago at the time, and being in Chicago, working for the president during those years was a transcendent experience. It absolutely shaped the way I view, quite frankly, the world. And I loved every minute of it that I did whatever I could to get a staff position on his 2012 re-election campaign. And it was the day after we won that campaign where he came into the office and he surprised us at headquarters. And he took a small bunch of us into a room, and he cheered us on and told us that it's our turn, that this is as far as he's going to go. And he challenged me personally to go into my community and be that change. I'm not an emotional person, but being close to the president, watching him bring the tears, I was in tears. I went home that day and I told my wife, listen, I know what I need to do. I finished my MBA at the University of Chicago, came to Michigan and got started in the automotive industry. But more importantly, I started paying attention. I got a chance to work with Democrats up and down the ballot, working and understanding all the inequalities and inequities that exist in Michigan, for how Michigan's working families are being left behind, and how so many kids and so many communities are disenfranchised because of poor schools. And are we doing enough to be able to look our kids in the eyes that we're doing enough to fight for their future? And with that, I hope to earn your vote and look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Ranjeev. And now our first question. And this will be reverse order. Ranjeev will go first, 2 minutes. If elected, what is the greatest priority you look forward to working on in January 2021?
Yes, this is one of the most important questions. And without fail right now, the biggest priority for Michigan is understanding how we're going to respond to this COVID crisis. By no means are we out of this crisis, and we are at full risk for a second wave coming. This is a public health crisis first and foremost, and we need to do whatever we can to limit exposure to Michiganders all across the state. We have seen how this virus has disproportionately affected communities of color throughout Michigan. We have seen the impacts of the first wave and how it hit Michigan so hard. On top of that, we're going to face a multi-billion-dollar, multi-year budget hit from the COVID crisis, and that's going to affect all the things that all the values and priorities that us Democrats have. Our public schools are facing potentially a $1.3 billion budget cut next year. How are we going to respond to those issues? This is a healthcare issue. That by no means should anyone ever have to think about, can I go to the hospital and pay this bill, or have to make that decision if going to the hospital or fighting for the health is something that they're going to need to decide. This is an issue for our small businesses across the state. Our economy is under assault right now. Why this is important is because of Proposition A from the 90s. Our sales tax formula generates revenue for so many different things of our Michigan's budget. And so what we need to do right now is we need to limit the effects of COVID. This is going to be in our life for a long time. We need to follow the science, follow the instructions of the orders coming out of the governor's office, and make sure that we're taking care of all Michiganders and limiting exposure.
Thank you so much. And with that, Ethan, what is the greatest priority that you look forward to working on?
Thank you. That's a really good question. And, I think the biggest priority on voters' minds today is the coronavirus. Gretchen Whitmer, Governor Whitmer's done a fantastic job at leading us with science and data. And that's why we're one of only 2 states that are on track to contain the virus. But our top priority of anybody in office next year needs to be helping us rebuild as we reel from the effects of this virus. The next state representative is going to take office with a weak economy, a larger budget deficit than we even saw during the Great Recession, and divided government. And my experience as a nonprofit professional taught me how to work with people of different backgrounds and opinions under tight budgets, but still get things done for people and meet the mission of an organization. And that's why, that makes me uniquely qualified to lead on day one, to make sure that we're rebuilding in a way where all of us come along, rebuilding in a way with job training and healthcare and education at the forefront, rebuilding in a way that we have paid family leave, rebuilding in a way where we acknowledge the racial disparities in COVID-19 death rates between Black and white Michiganders, and acknowledging the ways that we need to break down that systemic racism. I think that that's the top priority, is rebuilding in a way that all of us come along and everyone benefits.
Thank you, Ethan. Thank you very much. Okay, next, Ethan will start with this question. What are your plans to improve racial justice in your community?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. When you look at the murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and every single Black and brown person killed, named and unnamed, at the hands of police, those aren't isolated incidents. They're products of systemic racism, and it's cost Black Americans and all people of color their freedom, their safety, their ability to build education and wealth, and it's cost them their lives. And so I approach this with a deep sense of humility. I understand that as a white person, I don't fully know what the experiences are that some of my constituents would face of different races, of different religions. But I think that it's important that I build a campaign and a legislative office that's reflective of the community I hope to represent, ensuring that marginalized communities have a seat at the table by making it a point to elevate diverse voices, evaluating all policies through the lens of justice and the effects of systemic racism. And I've tried to do this work as a community organizer when I managed Dr. Syed Taj's campaign for supervisor, where we worked to engage communities that had never been engaged in the political process before in my district. So I think as I continue in politics, the best thing that I can do is listen and learn, work at dismantling those oppressive systems and allowing marginalized voices to lead and not taking up all the space.
Thank you so much, Ethan. Okay, Ranjeev, what are your plans to improve racial justice in your community?
Yeah, this is absolutely top of mind and a very personal issue to me. I have two small boys, and my boys will grow up in Michigan where they will be judged by the color of their skin. It's time for changes now. These conversations are long overdue. There has been systemic inequalities since the existence of this country. We, you know, there's 7 people running in this race for state representative in the House District 21. There have been multiple rallies all across the district fighting for racial justice and stopping the injustice that exists all across this country. I've been the only candidate in this race to show up to every single one of those rallies. This issue is top of mind for me. I know firsthand the experience of it. We are running in one of the most rapidly diversifying districts in the entire state. There are community members from all across the world in all backgrounds, all races, all religions that have come to make our district so beautiful and so vibrant. So many of those communities have been disenfranchised for a long time. Our campaign is spearheading that. From the moment we launched our campaign over a year ago, we launched with the message of inclusivity, equality, and equity. And what that meant was bringing the campaign to these people, to these disenfranchised communities. We have been localizing our literature in over 10 different languages. We have a campaign team that speaks over 10 different languages. We have people from all sorts of faiths, backgrounds, and sexual orientations that make up our diverse team. We have been reaching new communities and bringing new communities and hope to gain thousands of new voters out to the polls to help Democrats up and down the ballot. Because what we need more people in elected offices who understand these perspectives from firsthand and are prioritizing these issues. And these are no longer things that are nice to have, but things that we need, the change we need now.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, next question. It's back to you, Ranjeev. For transparency's sake, who makes up most of your donor base?
Yeah, this is a question I love answering. Our campaign is funded completely by working individuals. We do not have a single dime from any corporate PACs. On top of that, we have over 500 contributions that have made individual contributors that have made up our funds. Now, why this has been interesting is because if you go through our campaign finance reports, which are obviously public, you will see a number of new names from all sorts of backgrounds. We have started a movement here over a year ago that has been talking to new communities, people that have never donated before, people that quite frankly have never even voted before. And we obviously are building a coalition here. We have teachers and union workers and people from the healthcare industry and all facets of our economy. But we have a diverse coalition of a lot of new people who are excited about the movement that we're bringing and the glass ceiling that we can hopefully break with this campaign.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Ethan.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm really proud of the donor base that we have. No contributions from corporate special interests. 87% of our contributions are $100 or less. 56% were $25 or less. And $1 in $5 raised by our campaign were raised by people who work in our public schools. Those are unprecedented numbers. And I'm really proud to, be running a campaign that's funded by the people that I hope to bring voice to in Lansing. And I really quickly want to go back to what was mentioned at the last question. I went to 3 Black Lives Matter rallies in our district, and one of them I was the only candidate at. So I just wanted to set the record straight on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Okay, let's go to the next question. Ethan will be starting. Given the state of things financially, how will you deal with the lack of funding in the state budget? It's a huge question.
Yeah, that is a huge question. I see a budget as a moral document. It's a reflection of our values as a state. And there's no question that we'll be under a really tight budget. And the state constitution requires that we do balance that budget. So the real question isn't whether we'll balance the budget, but who will that budget be balanced on the backs of? Will we balance it on the backs of those who've been knocked down most by this virus, like the Republicans have for the last 10 years? Or will the wealthy and corporate executives start paying their fair share? I think that we need to make sure we are prioritizing things like education and healthcare. And we need to enact a graduated income tax to make the wealthy pay more, end tax breaks for companies that send jobs out of Michigan. And then we'll have the money to reinvest in the areas that that we need to invest in most as we reel from the coronavirus. And that'll be a budget that actually reflects the values of hardworking Michiganders. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Okay, Ranjeev, how would you deal with the lack of funding in the state budget?
This is an absolute, this is a very important question, and something that we're absolutely going to be dealing with for at least a few years here. And so I think experience matters. I have an MBA from the University of Chicago in finance. I worked in 2012 on President Obama's budget strategy team, managing over $1 billion. I work in the finance industry with Fiat Chrysler, and I understand budgets extremely well. But the issue we're going to have here, though, is that at the end of the day, no matter how you slice it and dice it, we're going to have budget cuts. Right now, we're projecting, as I mentioned earlier, over a $6 billion hit, a multi-year hit to our state budget. That's a lot of money. We're gonna have to have tough conversations across the board. I think it's extremely important right now that we start building coalitions, because what we've seen for the last few years and cycles in Lansing is a lot of political theater and gamesmanship, and it's time that our elected officials come together and start finding solutions for Michigan. And so building coalitions is something that I pride myself in and I'm very proud of. I have the endorsement of the UAW and making sure that our plants and our jobs stay here in Michigan. I have the endorsement of the MEA and making sure, because there's thousands of teachers in our district who trust me to ensure that we're fully funding our schools. I have the endorsement of the Small Business Association of Michigan, because understanding that our economy is our small business economy is the economy of Michigan. And so what we need to do is we need to stop the partisanship and start coming together and finding solutions.
Thank you so much, Ranjeev. Okay, I'm going to grab a question here that came pretty early from our chat. And this will be to Ranjeev first. How will you ensure that the diverse background of our district will be properly represented in Lansing?
Yes, I think that that's very important. One of the things that makes our district, again, so beautiful is that it's one of the most rapidly diversifying districts in the entire state. There are communities of color from all backgrounds of life coming to call House District 21 home. If elected, I would be the first person of color to ever represent this district. This is a glass ceiling that I am no means proud to break, but this is where we're at. This is reality. And so as we're having conversations at a national level about ensuring racial and social justice, it's also time that we start making sure that all communities, regardless of their background, regardless of their color, regardless of their gender, sexual orientation, health, socioeconomic status, that they have a place at the table. But it's no longer good enough just to have a seat at the table. They need to start building that table and then having a voice to make sure that they're in the decision-making process. So our team, again, is made up of diverse individuals of all backgrounds. We are doing our best to talk to new communities that have been largely disenfranchised for so long, that have never really had a voice politically and have been just knocked down. And it's time that we start giving them a voice, to making sure that they are involved in this process, and that the diversity that makes House District 21 so special is highlighted and brought to the forefront of policymaking issues.
Thank you, Ranjeev. Okay, Ethan.
Thank you. That's a really good question as well. And, you know, I'm so proud to be running to represent the 21st district. I always tell people that ask that the 21st district really exemplifies the Democratic Party, the Big Ten, people of all different walks of life, religion, race, all different backgrounds, all different beliefs, all different socioeconomic statuses. And I think that that representing all people effectively is very important. And that's why I've really made it a priority in my campaign to make sure that everybody has a voice in my campaign, and make sure that they have a voice in like I said earlier, you know, I enter these discussions with an immense amount of privilege. I have to come here humbly. You know, I don't know what it's like to suffer from some of the discrimination based on race, religion, or sex and gender. And I think it's important to defer to people that have, to let them take leadership on those issues. And I will take my cues from them and champion anything to break down things that hold people back, and make sure that every voice in our community is no longer left behind. Because my campaign is about lifting up those who've been knocked down and counted out. And a lot of that, it's been happening for too long, since the founding of our country. they've not had a voice at the table. They haven't been able to help create the change that they need to live successful and good lives.
Thank you, Ethan. Okay, I have one more question. Let me grab this question off of chat. And this would be to Ethan to start. What is your stance on the funding allocation for social services such as police, schools, mental health, drug treatments, housing, etc.?
Yeah, I think it's a really important discussion to have. One thing I learned while working as a nonprofit professional is that so many of our institutions don't get to the root of problems. And one of those is law enforcement. We ask police to do the job of everyone. We underfund social services that get to the root of poverty. We underfund mental health care. We underfund social workers. I mean, I saw growing up in school, as I got older, I saw police officers in schools, but we didn't have social workers. We didn't have counselors. And I think that we really need to have a fundamental shift in priorities. We need to look at how can we create all of our institutions, from law enforcement and everything else, in a way that truly gets to the root of the problem, truly lifts people up. I also saw, while I was working with nonprofit organizations, the ways that people are really denied the opportunity that those of us, a lot of us, take for granted. And that's part of the reason I'm a Democrat, because we're the party of anyone who's been knocked down, everyone who needs a helping hand. And when I needed a helping hand, there were people that were there for me. That's why I'm a Democrat. That's why I'm running for state representative, to make sure we have a government that champions the cause of the underdog. And that means funding social services. It means making sure that our policies are equitable.
Thank you. Ranjeev, what's your stance on the funding allocation for social services such as police, schools, mental health, drug treatment, housing, etc.?
Yeah, I think if anything, the last couple months have demonstrated the inequalities that exist within our state. And unfortunately, it's largely due to the fact that we have been underfunding many of the things listed here, if not other items. And so it's time that we stop giving corporations tax breaks and start making sure that our money is going to the places where it needs to go, and start that we have preventative and proactive on all these issues. It starts with schools. We absolutely need to fully fund our schools. Again, I am proudly endorsed. I'm the only candidate here to stand with the MEA and be proudly endorsed by thousands of district teachers across our district to understand that we need to do our best to start solving these problems at an early age. The racial and educational attainment gaps, can no longer exist. We need to fight to close those. Mental health, there's been a stigma. Quite frankly, this issue is very personal to me. I've been a part of 2 pregnancies with my wife. She obviously did all the work, but I completely understand the issues of postpartum. We, unfortunately, as a society, do not talk about mental health nearly enough. We need to make it more accessible to all Michiganders. This cannot be something that you have to navigate and try to find help for. Quite frankly, a lot of times it needs to happen right away or very quickly. Drug treatments are absolutely an essential part of the underserved community. We have been partnering with organizations all across the district to ensure that we are highlighting and trying to do our best to allocate more funding to these issues. And so the question is, the answer in my mind is that we need to start these solutions at a very early part of the process, and we need to try to allot as much money and funding as we can to solve these issues.
Thank you so much. We're getting close to the end of the time. I think I can get one more in. How are you involving the voices of young people, the next generation of leadership, in your campaign? And this will start with Ranjeev.
Yeah, so this is important. I started this campaign over a year ago, fighting for diversity and inclusion, regardless of your background and belief. And that means no discrimination based on any factor, including age. I am so proud that our team is, we have 30 individuals working on my team. 90% of them are under the age of 35. Overwhelming majority of them are women and people of color. In fact, as we're on the 11th district meeting here, the 11th district youth group council, every single board member on that council is a member of my team. We are doing whatever we can to highlight the voice of all communities, young and old and everything in between, to make sure that all voices and this Michigan again works for everybody.
Well, that's a really good question. I'm proud to have been leading the way to knock down barriers and glass ceilings to get young people involved in the political process locally and in the Democratic Party at large. I served as president of the Michigan Federation of College Democrats, where we brought suit against the state of Michigan to knock down GOP voter suppression that made it harder for college students to have the right to vote. Because of the work we did, thousands of Michiganders, young Michiganders, will be able to make their voice heard in this election. I was the youngest person to represent Michigan at the Democratic National Convention. I got involved at 14 years old. I was the youngest campaign manager for a competitive House race last cycle. I know what it's like to be young and to be denied a place at the table because of my age. And so I've done everything I could to make sure that young people are heard. That's why I'm proud to have the endorsement of the Michigan Federation of College Democrats and the Michigan Democratic Party Youth Caucus, the official chapter of the Young Democrats of America. Proud to be endorsed as the only candidate of the organizations representing Democratic voters aged 13 to 35 in this state.
Thank you so much, Ethan. And with that, we're going to closing statement. Ranjeev, you will go first. 1 minute, please.
Yeah, so thank you so much to the 11th District Dems for organizing today's candidate forum. So for over the last year, we have had thousands of conversations with neighbors and built a strong coalition to make history in this district. Our campaign from the very beginning was all about making Michigan a place which works for everyone and a place where we can all be proud to raise our family again. Our coalition spans the support of the UAW, the MEA, the Sierra Club, Planned Parenthood. We also have the endorsements, as Lisa mentioned, of the term limited incumbent, Christy Pagan, State Senator Dana Pohanke. We have over 40 organizations and individuals who are in our corner. I will spare everyone the details, but for a full list, please visit our website. But we need elected leaders with the experience to get the job done. And so I've said time and time again that this is the most important election of our lifetime. We tend to say that every cycle, but that has never been more true than it is right now. History books will be written about these very years. And when our kids grow up or our grandkids grow up, they're gonna ask, they're gonna study these very years in their history books and they're gonna ask, hey, what did you do to fight back for this? And we need to be able to look at those kids in the eyes and tell them that we did everything in our power to fight for their future. And that's what we're doing. And so I'm asking everyone here to please believe in Ranjeev and join our team.
Thank you, Ranjeev. Ethan, go ahead, 1 minute.
Well, thank you to the 11th Congressional District for holding this forum. Thank you to Lisa and Louise for helping moderate. The next state representative is going to face a state with enormous challenges. My experience as a nonprofit professional community organizer make me uniquely qualified to get things done on the issues that matter most to our community. I've managed staff and large budgets, chaired boards, led campaigns and organizations, and brought people of different backgrounds together behind common purpose. I'll bring the right experience to be an effective voice for our community. But experience only matters when you are rooted in the community and have been working to hear the concerns of the community for years. Before I ever thought about running for office, I had knocked every single neighborhood in my district several times over the decade. I've seen the issues that people have had, the things that still persist. And that's why I'm proud to be endorsed by our community's Democratic trailblazers, Diane Slavens and Stephen Schneiderman, who ran and were elected when there weren't any other Democrats. We were in the trenches together making Canton a Democratic community, and I'm proud to have their support. I hope to represent us next year.
Thank you so much, Ethan. And with that, I can say that House District 21 has 2 extraordinary candidates to choose from. Thank you so much.